It has been a difficult and dramatic day in Boulder, 3.5 years after the King Soopers shooting. Today, the shooter, Ahmad Alissa, was found guilty on all 55 counts, found sane and guilty of those 55 counts, now facing 10 life sentences. The verdict came down early this afternoon, the sentence just about an hour ago. Now, the question is, afterwards, what do people have to say outside of the courtroom? District Attorney Michael Doherty and some of the victims' family members might speak today.
Yeah, they have gathered behind him. He prosecuted this case along with other prosecutors. The burden on them was to prove that the shooter in this case was sane on the day of that attack. That is what has led to so many delays in this trial, has been the issue of competency. We've heard some really powerful and heartbreaking statements in court this afternoon from some of the family members, but for them, this is the gathering that they are all now part of a community, if you will, where they have suffered together and are finally getting a chance to say some of their thoughts. You're looking at Officer Eric Talley's dad right there, some of the other family members that we've become a little bit familiar with. Officer Talley has 7 children. He responded to the shooting that day and died along with 9 others, and we have come to know so many of these families only through learning what they've gone through, really, and a little bit about the people that they lost.
They are grouped together. They are together, and District Attorney Michael Doherty is now addressing. Let's listen to what he has to say.
And then turn it over to Chief Redfern, and then take questions at the end if you have any questions. Today marks the end of an incredibly long and painful journey for the victims of the massacre at King Soopers on March 22nd, 2021. It has been a difficult journey, especially for the victims and their family members, but also for this community, because of what happened and how many people were so deeply impacted by what the defendant chose to do on March 22nd. And make no mistake about it, folks, he was planning it since the very beginning of January 2021. He was deliberate, intentional, and brutal in what he did to the people at King Soopers. They were all random victims, completely innocent. And from getting to know the victim families over the years, I could tell you that they were very special people. And this community lost 10 lights when the defendant chose to kill as many people as he could at King Soopers. But these families are also remarkable in their strength, their resilience, and their love for one another and for those that they've lost. So today marks justice in the criminal case, but I also recognize, as you do, that nothing will repair the harm, the damage, and the trauma that the defendant inflicted upon them. So today we ask for, and he has now received, the maximum sentence allowed under law, which is 10 consecutive life terms, 1 for each of the victims that he murdered. And then maximum sentences on each one of the attempted murder counts. That maximum sentence is 48 years, with each one running consecutive. For attempted murder victims, where they're charged with 2 different theories of attempted murder, those counts will merge under the law, so that's why the total number is different than what you may have been calculating in the back of the courtroom. The assault count carries a maximum sentence of 32 years. The judge imposed the maximum sentence on that count, which again runs consecutive to the others. And then on large capacity magazine counts, of which there were 6 he was convicted of, the court imposed 1 year for each of those to run consecutive. So the total by my count is 10 sentences of life without the possibility of parole, each running consecutive to one another, and then another 1,334 years in state prison consecutive on top of that. I think more than anything, what matters today is that justice has finally been done in this case. And it's just on the criminal case. The victims will forever carry with them the loss. But today we bring what has been a really painful chapter in the criminal court to an end, to its rightful end. I am really grateful to the jury. This is a hard case to sit in court for every day. Some of the people in the courtroom we hear because they're victims. Their family members were killed, or they themselves were almost murdered. Some of the people in there were doing their jobs, like all of you, which I really respect, truthfully, and I appreciate. And then you have the jurors who are chosen from random. and they come down and they sit and they listen and they watch, and they have to listen to all the evidence and watch that brutal video of what the defendant did, and ultimately work together to reach a unanimous verdict based on the evidence, which was justice, in finding the defendant guilty of all 55 counts. I am really grateful to the Boulder Police Department, to Chief Redfern, who's an outstanding partner and ally in law enforcement, but also all the outstanding women and men in Boulder PD and the law enforcement agencies that responded. That list is too long for me to remember. But there were so many agencies that responded on March 22nd and then never stopped working this. That night at Boulder Police Department, I stood in front of 130 law enforcement officers and investigators, and we talked about this day happening. We talked about what is it going to mean to do our jobs the very best we could to have justice done for the victims. It's been a tremendous team effort. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the victim advocates from the District Attorney's Office, but also the Boulder Police Department, Boulder Strong, and other agencies. We've had a victim advocate assigned to every family since day one. And for some of those victim advocates, when this process started, they had no idea that day one would be the beginning of a 3.5-year journey with these families. And they've never left their side. We're here today because the victim advocates did so much to support the victim families through what has been a grueling process. And I'm really grateful to them and all the women and men in the DA's office and the other agencies that came together to help with this effort. I'm going to turn it over to the Chief Redfern, and then I'm happy to take any questions you have after everybody gets done. Thank you.
Good evening. As Michael said, my name is Stephen Redfern, and I have the honor of being the Boulder Police Chief. I'm humbled to be here today to say a few words on behalf of the Boulder Police Department and as well as the City of Boulder. As we reflect today on the closing of an incredibly important chapter of the 2021 mass shooting, many reflections and emotions come to mind. On March 22nd, 2021 at 2:30 p.m., a 911 call came into our dispatch center that would change so many lives. The call reporting a shooting at the Table Mesa King Soopers was immediately aired to officers, some of whom stand behind me today. As you've heard throughout this trial, our officers did exactly as they are trained to do. They drove as fast as they could to get there, and then when they got there, they ran into that store towards gunfire while everyone else was running out. We've heard a few stories during this trial of our officers disregarding their own safety and lives to stop a gunman who now has been held accountable. Some of these officers had decades of service, and some were on the job for less than a week. Those officers are mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, coaches and mentors. They all knew that that day they could have just as easily been a shopper rather than one of the first responders. Our officers and officers from other responding agencies entered that store without hesitation because they knew what they had to do. They had trained extensively for calls just like this, hoping it would never come across the radio airwaves. During this trial, you also heard about the distinguished heroism of the officers who continued to push into the store while taking rifle fire, and ultimately the officer who ended the gunman's rampage. It is a miracle that we did not lose more officers that day. We owe all of those who responded that day and who have worked tirelessly since, the days, months, and years after, a great debt of gratitude. I can assure you that without hesitation, our officers would make the same decision today to ensure people intent on harming our community will not triumph. Tragically, one officer paid the ultimate sacrifice that day while protecting his community. Officer Eric Talley, radio call sign 295, ran directly into that store without hesitation to confront evil. Eric's final act of selflessness and bravery on behalf of his beloved community. 9 of our community members could not be saved that day, but from the moment Eric and his fellow officers entered that store, no more loss of life occurred. This is the definition of selflessness and heroism, and its impact cannot be understated. Many of Officer Talley's friends and family have been present throughout the trial and are here with us today. To all of you, I want to thank you for your perseverance, strength, and resilience, as it is an inspiration to all of us. I also want to thank you for sharing Eric with the community and for sharing Eric with BPD. Eric's life and sacrifice will live on forever. All of you are a part of our BPD family, but also our City of Boulder family, and we are forever indebted to you. Officer Eric Talley was one of 10 people whose lives were so tragically taken that day, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and honor the families of all of the amazing people who lost their lives that day. We will always have a pit in our stomachs knowing that those incredible women and men are no longer with us in this world, and we grieve the loss of your loved ones with you. The greatest way to honor those we've lost is to never forget their lives and to carry on their legacy with courage and integrity. The Boulder Police Department will continue to work tirelessly to do everything we can to prevent such a tragedy from ever occurring again. We lost such incredible men and women that day, and we will work tirelessly to do everything we can to prevent harm like this in the future. As I close, I want to end by sharing my sincere gratitude for everyone who got us to this point today. This trial was no easy feat. And as I shared with our district attorney, my friend Michael Doherty, on the first day of this trial when opening statements occurred, there could have been no better district attorney's office and men and women prosecuting this case. I knew we were in good hands. As Michael said, there were so many others who helped us in this case to come to fruition, and we have a great deal of gratitude to everyone. To our partner agencies who answered our call for help that day, some taking fire and receiving injuries, we are indebted to you. And to our federal partners who helped us work through a large and complicated crime scene and investigation, thank you. We rely heavily on our partnerships, and so many agencies got to Boulder as fast as they could that day and stood alongside of our officers amidst the chaos. We hope to never have to return the favor, but please know our city is eternally grateful for all our partnerships throughout the region. I would also be remiss if I did not thank my colleagues at the City of Boulder, as well as our elected officials who have stood by BPD from the moment this tragedy occurred and have continued to support our work and work with us as this case progressed through the legal system. Lastly, I want to thank our community. The community has shown our employees so much love in the aftermath of this tragedy and throughout this trial. The best way we can show the world that we will not be intimidated by cowards focused on harming our community is to come together, to persevere, and come out stronger and more united while never forgetting those we lost. We must remember that we share far more in common than we share differences, and I would ask that we remember everyone who has been touched by this tragedy and how much we have come together in its aftermath. In my experience, closure is not easily attained in situations like this, but I hope that today's verdict provides everyone with some peace now that this important part of our journey comes to a close. Thank you.
So I know most of you, or have talked with a lot of you in these last 3.5 years, and I want to thank you as well for sharing Rikki Old's life with everyone and making the victims of this brutal murder, mass shooting, bringing them and keeping them in the forefront instead of the murderer. Okay? I'm here today to give my thanks to this amazing prosecution team of Mr. Doherty, Mr. Kuffner, and Adam when he was here, and everybody else in his office. They have worked tirelessly and so thoroughly on this case that any jury that was before them with the case that they presented would have had the same outcome, the same verdict because of them. Also, I would like to thank the victim advocates. They truly are the ones that were there for us, you know, from day one through this entire 3 years, 6 months, and 1 day. Okay? They deserve everybody's utmost gratitude and appreciation, and I have nothing but love for all of them in my heart. When you can walk into a room and you get a hug and you get that little piece of reassurance that everything's going to be okay. As this chapter closes, it doesn't bring back any of our loved ones. But with this verdict, it ensures that this murderer will pay for his crimes and his heinous, brutal murders for the rest of his life. And I can talk to you individually later if you have questions. Thank you.
My name is Kirsten Brooks. I'm Eric Talley's little sister and his only sister. And I'm here today also to thank the Boulder Police Department, every officer that responded to that shooting, to the respect of the press, to the respect of you all who have watched us struggle and not hampered us or bothered us. That's rare. I don't know if that's just Boulder. I want to thank the prosecution because, my God, they fired that straight. And my brother was not shopping at King Soopers that day. He was working. And when he flew into that store and he went in there for 2 reasons. I've known him my whole life. He went in there to protect people, and he went in there to fire a bullet into that killer's head. And the trajectory of that bullet is finished today in the justice of what these people have done. And I am so thankful for that because my family and I and Eric's 7 children can sleep at night knowing that the nightmare, the monster, is going to be put away. And I am so grateful and thankful in my heart, and that is mixed with grief and loss that my brother's not standing here today telling me to shut up. I miss him, I miss his laugh, and I wish you'd all known him. Thank you.
I will never say his name. He took Jody from us. Why? Lots of names and diagnoses have been thrown around, but to me, there's only one way I can understand this. This gentleman was bullied and dark and depressed and no support from his family. If he was so sick, as they say, why did they not get him help? Take the guns and render this preventable. Jody was shot once in the back and crawled under a register to lie in wait to get shot 3 more times, fatally to the head. That is a hate crime. Her daughters Alex and Channing are so distraught and crushed they could not speak, so I will speak for them. So sorry. I can't get this. This is Alex comforting me, if you can believe that, after losing her mother. I hope you can shut the door to this because this is excruciating. No one should have to sit in a court across from a murderer of someone you love and have to listen to the stories. The brain and the heart isn't built for this. But like I said before, you are in that room because you love her so, and that's something that means a lot to us. She deserves that. Sorry. I got the mom I always knew was there, and man, was she 100%. I hold on to those years. I tried to think like her, react like her, love like her. She had so much life, especially because the first 60 years were tough, but I finally felt like she was moving on. She was supposed to live. She should be hiking with her dogs, playing with her grandchildren. Meeting new people, finding someone who loves her, seeing my sister do the things my mom always wanted her to do. The list goes on. We will miss her every second of every day. And we thank everyone who has helped, the prosecution, Boulder Police, the SWAT team. So to Alex and Channing and Everett and Emmy and Chuck and Corey, I speak for them to say, this shouldn't have happened. Thank you.
My name is Olivia McKenzie. I am the daughter of Lynn Murray. She was shopping for Instacart that day, something I told her she might like to do to make money in the pandemic. And we did our first Instacart shopping at Sprouts off Arapahoe. And that was actually the store that I would be leaving to get the call that my father would pass away a year later from a heart attack, I believe because of this event. There is no words, I mean, everybody said this today, there's no words to describe the pain of an event like this. Nobody should have to go through this, and I just hope that the sentencing that he received today nudges in the direction to lessen, rephrase. I just hope that other potential mass shooters that have the desire to do this understand there's a consequence, and that I don't feel insanity as a cop-out should be an option. My mom was an incredible woman, and she should still be here. And on that day, I shouldn't have had to wait for hours the way that we waited. I shouldn't have had to walk through a grocery store a couple weeks later to see where she died. And we shouldn't have had to go through this trial to relearn all of the horrific details. Life is not the same. Going to the grocery store is not the same because of this. But with that being said, I'm incredibly grateful to the District Attorney's Office for all of their hard work and getting the verdict we really hoped for. And I'm just very grateful. And I'm very grateful to the community and for everybody that's helped lift us up in the past 3 years to get through this, because navigating the trauma and the pain of an event like this is, nobody has a guidebook. We all understand grief, hopefully, maybe, well, not hopefully, but to some capacity, you know, if you've lost somebody, you understand. But to try to understand how this can happen to somebody you love, and try to live, you know, your life going to the grocery store every day is something that we do every day. And no, it's not something that, you know, we can do so easily. So this has impacted our lives. This has impacted my life. This has impacted my brother's life, and it has taken, I believe, my father's life. I now have no parents because of this. So I'm very grateful for the justice that's been served today, and thank you to everybody for helping us get here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erica Mahoney, and I'm Kevin Mahoney's daughter. I grew up in Boulder, less than 5 minutes away from King Soopers. Boulder is so beautiful. But on March 22nd, 2021, darkness crept in. I never expected that my dad would have to run for his life in the parking lot of a grocery store. Over the past 3.5 years, I've been searching for the light, and I have found it in unforeseeable ways. All these people behind me are light, and my dad is light, and the 9 others who lost their lives that day continue to emanate their light. I was 6 months pregnant when my dad was killed. Today, I am a mom of 2 beautiful children. If there's one thing I want for my children and for all of the children in this country, it's that they don't have to grow up with the constant fear of mass shootings. We have to figure out a way to make them stop. I believe hope is on the horizon. I feel hopeful, and all these people behind me are proof of that hope. Thank you.
DA Doherty and Chief Redfern will take a few questions before we conclude. Any questions? Oh, did you want to speak? Oh, okay. Do you want to? Yep. Shay, Talley. Do you want to spell your last name for them?
Talley. I just wanted the public to know who Officer Eric Talley was. He was my son, but he was much more than that. But just to give you an idea, about 6 months before he died, he gave me a phone call. We called, I live 800 miles away, so we didn't get called enough, but he called me, and just out of the blue, he started talking and apologizing about what he had, something he had done in the past. And I said, Eric, don't worry about it. You're my son. I forgive you. But he kept on and kept on. And finally, I cut to the chase. I said, what's going on, Eric? He says, I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud to call you father. There's no greater compliment that a father could have than that. And I just wanted you to know that. Thank you.
All right. Any questions? Okay.
The words of those at the center of the tragedy 3 years ago in Boulder. And today a jury decided guilty. No insanity, no excuse, just plain guilty. 10 times over. Boulder King Soopers shooter is going to spend every minute of every day of the rest of his life in prison. He got 10 life sentences and another 1,300 years beyond that. As you just heard, the survivors and the victims' families waited 3.5 long years for that. There was no question all along that the killer was Ahmad Alissa. Jurors rejected his defense team's claim that he was insane at the time due to schizophrenia. The case has been stalled for years as doctors ruled that he was not competent to stand trial. But after years of delays, the case went from verdict to sentencing in just minutes. And from the moment that we heard that first guilty verdict read on account of murder, we knew there was going to be life for him. Judge sentenced him to 10 consecutive life sentences without parole and another 1,300 years for attempted murder and weapons charges. The judge acknowledged in court that there's no real blueprint for the judicial system to respond to mass shootings, but perhaps there should be.
When I signed up to be a judge, they had no instruction for us in this type of a case. And thankfully so, because one would wish that you wouldn't need instruction on how to do a sentencing in this type of case. But unfortunately, that day has come that we need to start training judges on how you address so many victims of such a horrendous crime.
Before the sentencing, the judge heard directly from the families of the 10 people killed in the shooting, a chance for them to speak publicly about what their families lost and to speak directly to what the killer did and did not do, both on that day and in the year since.
It bothered me when the defense attorney said there are no words when describing the pain and suffering. There are words, so many words to choose from, words that span language barriers. How about I'm sorry? If we've never been denying he did it, then where is an apology? An iota of remorse from the defendant or his family would have gone a long way.
That was Erica Mahoney, who you heard from a moment ago outside the courthouse. She spoke in remembrance of her father, Kevin, who she has long described as being love and light personified, the neighborhood dad, the Meals on Wheels volunteer. The Mahoney family spoken about the presence of love and light even in the worst moments, like when people rushed in to help others survive that shooting. Minutes ago, we heard Erica Mahoney say that she has been looking for that light in the years since she lost her dad, and that she has found it in the people, in the community, in the city of Boulder. Kevin Vaughn has been there each day of this trial, has gotten to know those families. And Kevin, I think oftentimes we're at a loss for words, but it's important to take the cues from the folks closest to this about what they say they want and need from our community and what they say that they have received, which is unequivocal love for years.
That's right, Kyle. There were a lot of little moments today, in addition to the time that some of these victims' families and some of the survivors spent talking. When the judge was reading the guilty verdicts and she read guilty on count 10, the death of police officer Eric Talley, his father was sitting just in front of me, and he slowly bowed his head and family members leaned in with him. And to see Bob Olds, who has been tireless in keeping the stories of his niece Rikki alive these last 3.5 years, dabbing at tears after the guilty verdict in her murder was read. And the last person that really made me think about what these people want and need in terms of hope for the future was an officer named Pam Gignac. She's a veteran of more than 40 years in law enforcement. She was the first officer at the scene. She was with Officer Talley when he was killed. And when it got to reading the verdict for attempted murder on her life, she sat very stoically, but the officer next to her reached over and slowly patted her on the knee in a gesture of comfort. And once it was all over, once this 3.5-hour hearing was over, there were a lot of hugs and some tears and a feeling that finally a lot of these people can take a step forward.
So I tried to get off my fear hat and said, get on my Nana hat and said, "Hi, honey." And I hear this scream, "Nana, Daddy's dead." It cut my life in half. I couldn't even be a good Nana at that moment. I was just Eric's mom.
Kyle, that was just one of many, many emotional statements made in court today by survivors of those who died, and in some cases, people that were in the store and were shot out and barely got out alive.
You know, Kevin, there were the years of delays that dealt with the killer's competency, right? Could he understand what was going on in this trial? Before then at trial, once that issue was overcome, it was the question of whether or not he was insane on that day. You were there. You heard the defense arguments. Did they ever have a compelling case that he truly was insane by the legal definition, or was it fairly open and shut and the jury came back fast?
Kyle, I talked to an attorney last week who's been following the trial, not involved in it, and he said to me, no jury is going to conclude this defendant was insane if his own lawyers haven't put on a witness to testify that he was insane. They called a lot of family members and some experts to say that he had schizophrenia, that he was seriously mentally ill, but none of them did a sanity evaluation on them, and they did not have an expert who testified at trial that he was insane on the day of this crime. So the jury was out, I think by our count, about 5.5 hours if you count when they started on Friday. That's pretty quick when you've got 55 criminal charges and another 38 sentencing enhancers.
That is striking. They asked the jury to reach a conclusion that they did not have an expert to support, and the jury did not. Guilty was the verdict. Kevin Vaughn, thank you for your work over the last couple of weeks. Before we step away for a moment, then rejoin you with the rest of Next. Will you join us in a moment of remembrance for the 10 lives lost that day?